welcome to the How to Spark Success podcast show. I'm your host, Liz Hamlet, and I'm a success coach, business mentor. I'm also founder of Spark Succeeds. And this is the podcast show where I have conversations with smart and savvy business owners and people doing really amazing things around the world. We get to hear a bit about their stories and also steal some of their success secrets, most importantly. So today I'm delighted to have a guest all the way over from Denver, Colorado. He is a professional golfer turned speaker, a writer and a development coach, and his mission is to help others to live and work better. He's also a podcast expert, so he's the host of the Up and Comers podcast, and they have had hundreds of episodes. We'll hear a bit more about that. And also the author of a new book, which is called Catalysts of Hope, Unlocking Energy, Optimism and Your Full Potential. So I'm delighted to welcome THANE Marcus Ringler. How are you, THANE?
I'm doing very well, Liz. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
We were just saying how professional you're looking with your podcast setup.
I know, I got this last several months ago, but I've been pleased with it. When you're working from home, especially now with this year, and trying to find a way to soundproof your setting, this has been a nice grab from Amazon for pretty cheap, and it does a decent job. It's a nice invention.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And we were just having a chat before we click record all about your podcast. But do you want to tell us a bit about your story, all the different things that you're involved in? And obviously your journey, I was quite interested to hear your journey from golfer to speaker and coach.
Definitely. Well, like most of us on our journeys, especially as entrepreneurs or throughout life, it's never as we planned. And so none of us know the future. And I grew up playing golf starting from a young age, 3 or 4, and loved the sport and was just very competitive as a kid. And I was drawn to golf because I didn't have to worry about other people for the performance and the results. I could just do it all myself. And as a kid, when you're kind of naive and childish, that's a great thing. But as you get older, you realize you have to take full ownership, not only for the successes, but also the failures. And there's a lot more of those in golf than successes. And it was a really great journey. I got to play in college at the Masters University in LA, and went on to compete professionally for about 4 years. And it was a really amazing deep dive into human development and human performance, because once you get to a high enough level in golf, it really becomes a battle of your mind and how can you unlock your full potential as often and consistent as possible. And the biggest limiting factor is always your mind in that, believe it or not. So it was a really amazing journey. I ended up having a muscle strain in my left rhomboid near about halfway through, with it repeated 5 times over a year and a half. And that on off kind of just cycle of trying to figure out my body and how to solve the problem that I was facing was really devastating and hard and frustrating. But during that time, I really was able to diversify some of my interests, and I already was interested in a lot of things outside of golf. And that led to me writing my first book during that time, and then ultimately pivoting out of golf into what I do now. And a big part of that pivot came from asking myself, who have I been created, equipped, and called to be? And I think that's a great question, because it really looks holistically at, past, present, and future. And it looks at created is like those natural abilities you're given at birth. Equipped is your life experiences, what are that uniquely given you. And then called is that future passion or vision. And when you sit with that for a couple of months, like I did, it finally became clear that I could be more effective outside the world of golf than within it, for who I feel like I've been created, equipped, and called to be. And so that led to me pivoting and taking those lessons and those mindsets and those habits and disciplines from golf and from a lifelong pursuit of it to people in their work and people in their lives. And that's been the journey ever since.
Fantastic. And one of the things I'm quite interested in, because obviously when you were a golfer, your sort of network would have been a lot of, sports people, promoters and different things. So when you sort of did that pivot, how did you sort of reach out into a new community?
Totally. And that's one of the biggest hurdles, because as you know, business is all about relationships, and life is all about relationships. It's about people and relationships with one another. And so for me, I was never a golf nerd or golf fanatic. So I was a competitor and I loved competing, and the game of golf was what I loved competing in. And so my network in the golf world actually wasn't as big as it might have been. And then I had other relationships and networks that were somewhat in the business or entrepreneurial world that were already established with that, because I wasn't 100% like a golf nerd. So I already had a little bit of both. And then my brother-in-law is an executive coach. So I gained a lot of knowledge and feedback and just learned secondhand through him, and knew about the space. And then really it just kind of was a combination of trying to get things started by talking to a handful of friends that I thought were freelancers or teachers or entrepreneurs or people that could benefit from this, and tested it out with them. Just said, hey, I'd love to offer you this, test it out, prove the concept. And after those 5 or 6 months, I turned it into a practice, and that kind of kicked me off on the journey. But it is a process to develop those relationships, to meet the right people, to have mentors and people to pour into you. And it's a wondering, fun journey. So I think if we can just be patient with that process, it's usually the most helpful.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You know, what you were saying is your decision sort of on early on in childhood to sort of go into a solo sport. And now you're working with, you know, lots of people, and, you know, you do your podcast, and that's lots of interviewing. So, you know, what do you think you've taken, what disciplines have you sort of taken across from the golfing, you know, discipline through to what you do now? What's been the sort of key thing for you?
Yeah, there's a lot. It's funny how similar golf is to life. And, you know, honestly, any of the sports or performing arts or any discipline that we pursue at a high level will relate to life in so many ways. In golf, I think the ultimate thing that, if I could sum up in one summary sentence, it's that we need to take ownership and never settle. And that's kind of the rally cry I've been behind since then, because I think if we can, as individuals, take ownership for our thoughts, actions, and behaviors and never settle for less than we're capable of, that's how we bring our greatest gifts for the world's greatest good, whatever that is. And that's a broad statement, right? But the principles of taking ownership and never settle is what golf really instilled in me, because in golf, you have to take full ownership for everything. You can't blame teammates, coaches, referees. You can't even blame the weather, because other people are facing it too. So you have to just take ownership of every success and every failure, every single shot you hit. There's no hiding. You're kind of on an island, which is tough, but it makes you, it helps you grow in self-awareness, because self-awareness, I think, is a key to taking ownership, in the sense that if you're not aware of what you need to take ownership for, then you can't take ownership for it. And if you're not aware of what you're not taking ownership for, then you can't change that. And then the never settling is just all about discipline. It's saying, I am not going to settle. I'm not going to take the path of least resistance. I'm going to go down the harder road because I know it's a better road. And in golf, this really is in the mind. I mean, getting to a golf shot and not settling means I'm not going to entertain doubts, fears, or negative thoughts about this future shot I'm about to hit. And that is one of the hardest things to do, especially if you just hit a horrible shot and you're trying to overcome that negative momentum and the recent memory of that occasion. So it is really a discipline, and especially a mental discipline in that.
Yeah. And I was, you know, we were chatting earlier, but I'm really keen, obviously, as a podcast host myself, you know, one of the things I love about this show, and I also co-host a second show, is the opportunity to meet new people and, you know, hear more about their story, learn from their own journeys, you know, pick out, you know, what challenges they've overcome. But your Up and Comers podcast show that you host, how did that come about? You know, and, you know, tell us a bit about the show itself as well.
Yeah, you know, it's really funny. It was during golf still. I was competing, and I had a friend from college who I stayed in touch with, and our lives couldn't look more different, yet we were going through the same things ultimately at their root. And so we just thought, you know, if we're going through this and other people are too, and we're having great conversations about it, and what if we shared those? And podcasting was, you know, this was 4 years ago, so it was just getting to be more mainstream. I had been listening to a lot of podcasts with driving around the country for golf stuff, and I love them. And the Tim Ferriss show is probably my favorite. And I loved listening to the guests he brought on, but the common theme that I kept seeing was, these are people that have already arrived at a destination and are looking back and talking about it retroactively. They're not in the moment. They're not in that process of the journey. And we wanted to make a show about being in the process of the journey, not being past the journey that you're talking about. And so that was kind of the original idea. And obviously, as you do something, it changes and iterates and shifts along the way. So I co-founded with Adam Setzer, and he was a co-host for a year and a half, and then ended up switching, and he kind of phased out, and he's been the co-founder, but now I'm the full host and founder of the show. And I've been doing that for about 2.5 years. And that's been really a sweet journey to see the show shift and take form into what it is today. And it's focusing a lot on living with intentionality, and infusing intention into all we do, because life has tensions. It has these two polar opposites that we have to kind of live in the middle of. And that takes embracing that and living with intention. And so we talk to other people on that journey from a wide range. We've interviewed 83-year-olds all the way down to 20-year-olds. So it's been a wide range. And it's just been really fun, like you said, to develop a podcast develops relationships in a way that takes several coffee dates otherwise. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, you can really pick the brains of your guests, which is what I love. And I really like the concept of that, because I read a bit of research recently that was talking all about mentoring and obviously the benefits in your career or in your sort of entrepreneurial life of having a mentor. But actually, it proved that the most influential mentors are only about 18 months ahead of you in their journey. They've recently been through it, they've been through the challenges, and they can be really influential in your life. So I really like what you're doing with the Up and Comers show, and sort of seeing people that are just slightly ahead in that journey than you.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And honestly, part of it is we want to be able to learn from anyone and everyone, because we truly can. There's not a person we can't learn from, even if it's maybe learning what not to do from someone. So I love highlighting the fact that it doesn't matter the age, the stage, or where you're at in life. Everyone has something that we can learn from. And I think a podcast is a great place for that. And like you said with mentoring, I think mentoring is one of the greatest gifts and most important parts of life. And I've had the honor and privilege to get to mentor high school students in LA through Good City Mentors, a program a good friend of mine started, Brian Larrabee. And that's been 2 or 3 years now, probably 2.5 years. And it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It's very simple. Mentoring doesn't have to be hard. Really, it's just showing up for someone and being there and supporting them. That is, I think, what it means to be human.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people are really nervous about approaching people. I mean, it's great that you've done it through a sort of formalized setting, but particularly people very early in their career, younger or sort of coming out of college or university, is they're very nervous about sort of wasting time or sort of bothering people. But I generally find that people who are running their own businesses or sort of very senior actually want to give back, and making that approach to people to provide a little bit of mentoring, even if it's just exactly what you said, a couple of coffee dates or something, is really key. And I speak to a lot of people in the podcast and in my general sort of business life as well, who are sort of extolling the virtues of that networking. And I've got people that have met 365 new people in a year, and someone's written a book about meeting 100 people. So I think that networking is so important to your future success, and it does open up the thinking. I think when we're leaving college, when we're leaving university, we can get very sort of one directional in the where we think our career is going to be. And as you proved, and I've proved, where you think you're going to start and end your career is totally different from where we are now. So, you couldn't really have envisaged that. So do you, in terms of sort of reflecting back on your success and your journey and sort of continued journey, what do you think's been the biggest factor in your success?
Yeah, and I just want to underscore or follow up with what you just said there. I think it's really helpful and important that a lot of times we had this pressure coming out of college or even into our careers of, I need to know the vision. I need to know exactly what the next 10-year goal is. I need to know what that 10th step down the road is going to be. And we never do. It's just foolish to try and figure that out because we don't control the future and we don't know the future. And it's actually wasting our time and hurting us by trying to determine that 10th step before taking the first 9 steps to get there. And the point of that is that you're going to benefit. Yeah, you can have a long-term goal that's loosely held, but what's more important is just taking the next step. And by taking the next step, then you will learn the step that follows that. Not necessarily before you take the step, but after it. And I think as a young adult, you really, that's advice that I wish I would have had more of, in that it doesn't matter necessarily what that next step is, just take the best next step and the other steps will become clear as you keep stepping forward. Because, I never planned to be a writer. I never planned to be a speaker or a coach. I didn't plan any of these things or a podcast. I planned on being a professional golfer. And because I pursued that well, and because I pursued that with my all, it prepared me for all these other things. Yeah. It wasn't my plan to do all these other things, but I was prepared to do it because I did the first step well. And so I think whatever step you're on, do it to the best of your ability. And that goes back to never settling. Don't settle. Don't settle for the easy path, the path of least resistance, the commonly traveled going downstream, what everyone else does path. That's not what we're called to. Like if you want to go down the path of least resistance, go downstream, right? Just float down the river like the majority of people, like what culture maybe prescribes, that won't lead you to the fulfillment in the life that you want or the work that you want to do. We have to choose to go upstream, which takes effort and intention, a reason why behind what we're doing. So if we attach that intention and that purpose to that effort, then we can have the underlying motivation to keep paddling upstream, especially when it's hard. And I think that's one of the greatest pieces of advice I can give to young adults, but also that I keep giving to myself today, because it's not like the journey ever gets easier. We just get stronger, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have a lot of people that are sort of very concerned about, they've maybe started in one career and suddenly want to try looking at changing direction and, how that will impact their future opportunities. And as someone who has changed direction in my career and, I could have never envisaged when I was leaving uni with a languages degree that I would be doing what I'm doing now. I've traveled through the travel industry, investment banking, the housing sector before, launching my own business. And actually all of that brings a sort of really rich experience to your career. And I've just talking today with a client about creating opportunity. So even if you're going into a role, there's always opportunity to sort of add extra bits in, things that you're interested in, and sort of keeping moving forward, keeping learning. And it's exactly what you were saying. Don't panic now about 10 years 10 years time, because you'll be somewhere totally different than where you expected. So I think that's great advice. And, we've mentioned a bit, obviously, you're quite sporty, being a former golfer, I hope. And also living in Denver, there's lots of opportunities for sort of outdoor sports. So what would you say are some of your success habits, either sort of physical or mental, in your working week?
Yeah, I think it's really important to figure out what those are for you. For so long, and part of the process of development is we first look to the universal principles, right? The things that are generally true for most people in the space. So we always start by learning there, and then we need to transfer into individual principles, which is what out of those universal best apply to me for how I'm wired based on my situation and where I'm at in life. And that's kind of the process here. So when we hear other people's success habits or whatever it may be, we need to, again, learn the universe, but then deep dive into ourselves and self-awareness to learn, okay, what do I need? What's best for how I operate? And not necessarily just ascribe what other people do. And that's what I did in golf for the first year or so, was just look to other people and their games and their technique or strategy and try to find the magic blueprint for success instead of looking within me to discover what worked best for me. Yeah. And so I think a big part of a success habit for anyone, and myself included, is just really a practice of self-awareness, of sitting with a journal and reflecting, of meditating, of asking for feedback. Those are the three primary ways, the primary tools for developing self-awareness. I think consistently doing those is going to be huge. I mean, one of my favorite things is once a month I do a state of affairs journal, where I just map out on a journal all the things that are going on in my life, all the buckets. Usually there's like 3 main buckets and then a miscellaneous bucket, and just map out all the things that need to be done and where the priorities fall. And that just gets my mind kind of a snapshot of where I'm at. And that's a great rhythm. But on a daily level, I think bookends for your day are so vital, at least for me, for keeping what's within those bookends consistent and successful. So if I can keep my bookends consistent, then what's in between will be successful and sustainable. So that means starting and ending my day well. And for me, the morning time, I have my phone on airplane mode for at least the first couple hours, not even touching it. And I'm just spending time, maybe doing a little movement, getting water in me, and then reading, meditating, spending some time with God and my spiritual practice. And then maybe journaling a little bit about that, just so I can land in that learning. And then if I have some writing to do, I'd love to do that, or maybe even get a walk in outside. And sometimes it's a workout. This morning was a workout. So it does depend on the day, but having those bookends is a huge part of it.
And how successful is that? Because I know, I speak to a lot of business owners, super busy. And, things have changed for everyone recently, perhaps where we were going out and doing meetings, there was an obvious end to the working day. So how strict are you on sort of that, beginning and end of the day and the switch into sort of relaxation time?
Yeah, it is different for each season. So I think the season that we're in now with the pandemic has been harder on everyone. So I think showing grace and kindness to yourself is actually really important in this time. And yeah, I don't think everything has been as dialed in for me in this year, partly because I just got married in March, and partly because it's been pandemic. Thank you. Yeah. So, a lot of change and a lot of figuring things out of like what's best for me and my partner now. And then also, what does this season require with COVID, and that's been interesting. So yeah, I think it does depend on the season. I would say that ideally in a home environment, you have a dedicated space for work, and that's one of the greatest triggers for us to be able to shift in and out of just having a space that once I'm in this space, this is called work time, and that trigger allows us to shift in and out a lot better at home when there's a lot of competing desires or interests or even to-dos or tasks. And then the other side of it is, with more flexibility from being from home or from being self-employed, you can kind of trade slots of time. So for instance, this winter I have path to the mountains and I love snowboarding. So my wife and I are going to go up on a weekday to beat the traffic, and then maybe work a Saturday instead, and shift that schedule a little bit. So having that flexibility is great, but then you have to have the discipline to follow through with it. And that's, developed over time. And but I think it all comes together, and if we can be balanced and integrated with that, it is a great method. And then we can learn what we need, because each individual is going to be a little different with that.
Yeah, I'm a real advocate for sort of being able to sort of flex that time. If you wanted to do something when everyone else is in that working space. So fantastic. I was going to ask you about the mountains. So I'm not surprised that you're making best use of those. So that's fantastic. Yeah. And congratulations on your recent marriage. Yeah, just prior to COVID. So, hopefully next year you'll be able to sort of do more out and about together, but fantastic quality time that you're getting to spend together.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a journey and an adventure, and so sweet. We're just really grateful, even with the timing, that it all worked out. And it's been a hard season for anyone trying to get married, in the sense that plans have been changing, and you don't know what you can do or will not do. And so, I mean, I feel for everyone that's journeying into that this year. We were with them, and it's a hard thing with COVID, but it worked out well, and we've been really grateful and loving life. And it's been a sweet part of growing in my own self-awareness too, of learning better through having like a mirror that I live with now that can better help me see myself and understand myself. And she's been helping me a lot with understanding my emotions and processing and communicating those, and something that I'm pretty weak in. So that's been a really cool gift too.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing to be able to help and support other people through their emotions. It's quite a different one to sort of manage your own.
Totally.
So sort of reflecting back over your career and, entrepreneurial life, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
That's a great question. And I think part of me wants to not do anything differently. And I think a lot of people will say that, obviously, because I'm grateful for each part of it. But the thing that comes to mind beyond that would be this idea of full commitment. And so my college coach, golf coach at the time, he was really emphasizing this idea of full commitment, of saying, look, if you're going to do something, you have to be fully committed, especially if you're going to try and do something like professional golf. And if you ask any of the successful professional golfers on the PGA Tour, they're going to say, what would you do if you weren't playing golf? And they'd say, I don't know. I don't have any other idea. I don't have any idea, because they're fully committed. And so I heard that, but I also was interested in a lot of things. I knew how hard it would be, and I was pretty practical. And so while I didn't have a plan B, I kind of had a plan A.5. In that plan A.5, well, if this doesn't work out, then I could do all these things, right? That plan A.5 limited my abilities because it gave me an out. It gave me room for doubt to come in and myself an out if I didn't reach what I hoped to reach. And that hurt my performance. And so for the first year, I struggled with that. And finally, after about a year of competing professionally, I was able to say, you know what, this is hurting me. I need to let go of plan 8.5 and just fully commit and have only plan A and nothing else. And I wish I would have done that sooner. Yeah, I think that would have been really interesting to see the results that would have differed from that. And I think that's also true in business. And it has been for me. And I've had many spinning plates, which can sometimes feel like plan 8.5s, but they have been complementing each other and fulfilling kind of the whole. So it's been a little different, but it's still something that I've faced as an entrepreneur and as a coach as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And we talked a bit earlier about sort of your role as a mentor, and also the sort of advice that you've received over your career. So sort of thinking back, what do you think's been the best piece of advice about success that you've received?
Yeah. My grandfather is a great man and very wise man, been a great mentor for me. And I remember when I was writing my first book, he said, Thane, you're writing a book about running a marathon and you're only on mile 9. And I was like, you know what, Grandpa, that is a great piece of advice. And I think that's helped me taper my perspective, just knowing, look, I'm not trying to pretend like I have it all figured out, because I don't. I want to share what I've learned from my story thus far and what my perspective is right now. And hopefully my perspective will change, because that means I'm learning and growing. And I love the quote from Muhammad Ali, who said, the man who views his life at the age of 50, the same that he did at the age of 20, wasted 30 years of his life.
Yeah.
And so it was a really great piece of advice as I was transitioning out of golf and writing my first book, just to understand that the point isn't having it all figured out. The point is being honest about where you're at, and sharing from that with confidence, knowing that there's a lot to come and that my perspectives may change. Yeah,
definitely. And, everyone's experience is valid and it will be helpful to people at different stages. So, I love that. Your granddad's advice. Fantastic. Fantastic. So if people want to find out a bit more about you, about the work you do, the podcast, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, the THANEMARCUS.com is kind of my headquarters for all that I do. You'll find links for the books, the podcast, blogs, the 2 online courses that I launched this year on growing self-awareness and developing discipline. All of those things are at THANEMARCUS.com.
Amazing. So I'll make sure I include that in the show notes as well, so people can just click through. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been really interesting. I could talk for hours. So I'm going to check out more of the Up and Comers podcast. Seeing as if you've got, how many episodes now are you up to?
175 went live as of this recording today. So it's been really sweet. Yeah.
And that's 175 different people's perspectives on, how they've got to where they are today in their businesses and careers. So a great resource for advice.
Yes. Thank you so much, Liz. This has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining. And for the viewers and listeners today, join me for the next episode where I'll be joined by a fellow American, Jairus Tucker. He is owner and CEO of Real One-to-One Consulting, which is a business marketing agency. And his work can be found at #ThinkersAtWork. He is a real thinker, speaker, and leader. So it's going to be an interesting chat with him. And if you've been inspired about our talk today, obviously head over to Thane's website. But if you want to book in a call with myself, all about sparking your own success, then head over to sparksucceed.co.uk. So thanks, Thane. Thanks so much for joining me. And it's only morning for you, isn't it? So you've got a day ahead.
It is. Yes. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I'm excited. Got a good workout in before this, and now ready to crush the rest of the day. So.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us, and let's share the podcast episode. So thank you so much and have a great day. Take care.